They said bikers have no heart. They said men who wear leather and ride steel horses are too tough to cry, too hardened to love, too dangerous to trust. For years, Sarah heard the whispers, saw the judging looks, felt the disapproval from her family and friends. But today, surrounded by 30 pairs of eyes in a small clubhouse that smelled of motor oil and brotherhood, she was about to prove them all wrong. And what happened next would change not just her life, but the way everyone in that room understood what it truly means to be family. Sarah's hands trembled as she stood in the center of the room, her heart pounding so loud she was certain everyone could hear it. The worn wooden floors creaked beneath her feet, and the fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting harsh shadows across the faces of the men who had gathered. These weren't just any men. They were the Iron Brotherhood, one of the most respected motorcycle clubs in 3 counties. And standing right in front of her, with silver in his beard and stories etched into every line on his weathered face, was Marcus. Her Marcus. She had met him 2 years ago at a charity event. While everyone else saw the patches on his vest and the tattoos covering his arms and immediately walked the other way, Sarah saw something different. She saw a man who had organized a toy drive that collected over 5,000 gifts for children in foster care. She saw someone who stopped to help an elderly woman change her tire in the pouring rain. She saw kindness wrapped in leather, gentleness hidden behind a gruff exterior, and a heart bigger than anyone gave him credit for. Their love story hadn't been easy. Sarah's parents refused to meet him for the first year. Her friends staged an intervention, begging her to leave before she got hurt. Strangers would cross the street when they saw them walking together, their prejudice and fear palpable in every sidelong glance. But Marcus never wavered. He loved her with a quiet, steady devotion that made her feel safer than she had ever felt in her life. He brought her coffee every morning, remembered every important date, and listened to her talk about her day with genuine interest in his eyes. He had shown her that real strength isn't about looking tough on the outside. It's about being vulnerable enough to let someone see your soul. Now, 6 months after Marcus had proposed to her in the most traditional way possible, down on one knee in a restaurant with a diamond ring that represented months of him working overtime, Sarah had a surprise of her own. She had asked his club brothers to gather today under the pretense of a meeting. Marcus stood confused, his eyes searching hers for answers as his brothers formed a semicircle behind him, their leather vests adorned with patches that told stories of roads traveled and bonds forged. Taking a deep breath, Sarah began to speak, her voice shaking but determined. She told everyone in that room about the man she had come to know. She talked about how Marcus volunteered every Tuesday at the VA hospital, sitting with veterans who had no family, just listening to their stories for hours. She shared how he had secretly been paying the rent for a single mother in their apartment building who had lost her job, never wanting recognition or thanks. She described the way he cried when they watched movies with sad endings, how he called his mother every single day, how he had taken in a stray dog that everyone else said was too aggressive to save and turned it into the gentlest companion imaginable. As she spoke, something shifted in the room. The tough exteriors began to crack. Eyes that had seen too much hardship started to glisten with unshed tears. These men, who society had written off as dangerous and heartless, nodded in recognition because they knew. They knew Marcus. They had ridden thousands of miles beside him. They had seen him give the shirt off his back to someone in need. They had watched him organize fundraisers for sick children, escort bullied kids to school so they would feel safe, and show up at the funerals of people who had no one else to mourn them. Then Sarah did something that nobody expected. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a simple silver band. It wasn't expensive or flashy. It was understated and strong, just like the man standing before her. And then, right there in that clubhouse, surrounded by men who were told their whole lives they were too rough to understand love, Sarah got down on one knee. The room fell completely silent. You could have heard a pin drop on that concrete floor. Marcus's eyes went wide, his calloused hands coming up to cover his mouth as realization dawned on his face. Sarah looked up at him, tears streaming down her cheeks, and asked him a question that would echo through that clubhouse for years to come. She asked him if he would not just be her husband, but if he would do her the honor of becoming her partner in every sense of the word. She told him that when they got married in 6 months, she didn't just want to take his name. She wanted to take his mission. She wanted to spend the rest of her life showing people that love exists in unexpected places, that family isn't always about blood, and that the roughest hands can hold the gentlest hearts. She asked if he would let her join him in his work with the community, if he would teach her to ride so she could understand the freedom he felt on the open road, if he would allow her to become part of the brotherhood that had shaped him into the incredible man he had become. And then she asked the question that mattered most. She asked if he would wear this ring as a symbol that he wasn't just her fiancé, but her best friend, her protector, her home, and her heart. She asked if he would marry her not just once in a church ceremony they had already planned, but every single day for the rest of their lives through actions, choices, and unwavering commitment. What happened next is something that everyone in that room would remember for the rest of their lives. Marcus, this mountain of a man who stood 6'3" and weighed 240 pounds of solid muscle, this person who had stared down dangerous situations without flinching, who had weathered storms that would break most people, completely fell apart. Tears poured down his face as he nodded, unable to form words. He reached down and pulled Sarah up into his arms, holding her so tightly that she could barely breathe, his whole body shaking with emotion. But the truly remarkable moment came next. One by one, every single man in that room began to cry. These tough bikers, these men with scars and stories, these brothers who had built walls around their hearts to survive in a world that judged them harshly, let those walls crumble. They cried for Marcus and Sarah. They cried for the beauty of a love that refused to bow to prejudice. They cried for every time someone had assumed the worst about them. And they cried tears of joy because in that moment, they were reminded that despite everything the world had thrown at them, they were still capable of witnessing and celebrating something pure and beautiful. The president of the club, a man named Wolf who rarely showed emotion, stepped forward and placed his hand on Marcus's shoulder. With tears running into his gray beard, he said something that would become legendary in their community. He said that people think bikers have no heart because we protect them so carefully. We've been hurt, judged, and cast aside so many times that we learn to guard what matters most. But the truth is, we have the biggest hearts of all. We just reserve them for people who take the time to look past the leather and see the soul underneath. As Sarah slipped that silver band onto Marcus's finger, the clubhouse erupted. Men who moments ago had stood stoic and strong were hugging each other, wiping away tears, and celebrating a love that proved everything the world believed about them was wrong. Someone started clapping, and soon the applause was thunderous, mixed with cheers, whistles, and the sound of brotherhood in its purest form. That day in a humble clubhouse, surrounded by men the world had dismissed, Sarah and Marcus proved that love knows no boundaries, that family is what you make it, and that the most unexpected places often hold the most extraordinary hearts. They showed everyone watching that real strength isn't about building walls, it's about having the courage to let them fall. And in doing so, they reminded 30 hardened bikers that despite everything they had endured, they were still worthy of witnessing magic. This wasn't just a proposal. It was a revolution of the heart, and every person in that room was forever changed by it.